Welcome back to Midnight Signal AI. It's May 23rd, 2026, and today's episode is packed with major platform moves from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, plus a few research stories that hint at where the field is heading next. We're starting with OpenAI's push deeper into productivity software, then we'll hit Anthropic's enterprise momentum and Google's I/O announcements before we close on a couple of research and policy angles.
And the common thread today is distribution. A lot of these stories are less about a model demo and more about where AI actually shows up, in workflows, in offices, and in products people already use. That's the real battleground now.
Let's start with the biggest OpenAI story, from the decoder and Dataconomy. ChatGPT is moving directly into Microsoft PowerPoint with a beta add-in and a warning that it could accidentally delete content. That's a strong signal that OpenAI wants to be inside the document layer, not just the chat window.
The warning matters almost as much as the feature. If a tool can edit a presentation, it can also break one, and that means the product has to earn trust in a much more fragile environment than a chatbot prompt. PowerPoint is a high-stakes canvas.
Exactly, and the search engine Roundtable report adds another wrinkle. OpenAI is also testing updates in ChatGPT Ads Manager. So we're seeing the same pattern in two places, productivity and monetization infrastructure. OpenAI isn't just adding features, it's building a broader operating system around work.
That's a big signal because ads tooling is where AI stops being a novelty and starts touching budgets. If OpenAI can make campaign work easier, it gets embedded in a revenue process, and those are hard tools to rip out later.
Staying with OpenAI, Memeburn says ChatGPT is launching for personal finance in 2026. Even if the details are still light, the direction is clear. OpenAI wants ChatGPT to be the place people ask about money, planning, and everyday decisions, which raises the bar on accuracy and advice quality.
Finance is one of those categories where the user tolerance for hallucinations is basically zero. So if OpenAI is going there, it suggests confidence in guardrails, but it also invites scrutiny from regulators, banks, and anyone who's had a bad automated recommendation.
And there's one more OpenAI angle from the Times of India. The company's move may have complicated the Cannes debut plans for Critterz, the animated movie tied to its broader creative ambitions. That's interesting because it shows OpenAI's reach is no longer just software, it's colliding with entertainment timelines and distribution.
That's a reminder that AI companies don't operate in a vacuum. When they move into media, finance, or office software, the product decisions immediately become cultural and political decisions too.
Switching to Anthropic, MIT Technology Review's The Download focused on code with Claude and called it a look at coding's future, whether developers like it or not. The message is that coding is becoming more collaborative, more agentic, and probably more standardized around model-assisted workflows.
That framing is important because it shifts the debate away from whether AI can write code at all. The real question is what kind of engineering organization you get when the default workflow includes a model sitting inside the loop.
And the enterprise story from Quantum Zeitgeist says more than 276,000 KPMG employees are gaining access to Claude through an alliance. That's a huge distribution win for Anthropic, and it suggests the company is leaning hard into workplace adoption rather than consumer splashiness.
Exactly. A consulting giant giving a model to that many employees is not just a customer win, it's a credibility signal. If Claude becomes part of day-to-day analysis and client work, Anthropic gets a lot closer to being infrastructure.
Staying with Anthropic, Nation Thailand reports that Japan will receive early access to the Claude Mythos AI model. Even without a lot of technical detail in the report, the regional early access angle matters because it suggests Anthropic is testing market-specific distribution and partnerships.
And that's especially relevant in Japan, where enterprise relationships and product localization can make or break adoption. Early access isn't just a perk, it's a wedge into long-term usage.
Now to Google, where the Indian Panorama pulled together the biggest Google I/O 2026 announcements, an Omni world model, Gemini 3.5, and smart audio glasses. That's a broad product stack, but the common theme is that Google is trying to make AI feel less like a chat box and more like an ambient layer across devices.
The smart glasses piece is especially telling. Once AI leaves the screen and moves into audio or wearables, the conversation changes from productivity to presence, what the assistant sees, hears, and does on your behalf.
There's also a separate Google adjacent signal in the archive research stream, a paper on retrieval-augmented long context translation for cultural image captioning used Gemini 2.5 Flash in a two-stage pipeline. The point isn't just the benchmark gains, it's that Gemini is being used as a component inside specialized multilingual systems, which is exactly how frontier models spread into real research workflows.
I like that story because it cuts through the hype. The most important thing a frontier model can do is not always a flashy demo. Sometimes it's being reliable enough to slot into a pipeline that solves a narrow but real problem.
One more Google note, the same I/O coverage points to a world model push, which matters because world models are basically Google saying it wants AI that understands environments, not just text. That's a much bigger bet on planning, perception, and embodied applications over time.
And if that works, it changes the whole developer conversation. You stop asking only what the model can generate and start asking what it can reason about across time, space, and devices. That's a much harder product, but also a much deeper moat.
On the research side, Archive also has a security document classification paper called TorchSight, built around a fine-tuned local QN 3.5 27 billion model. The interesting part is the local deployment angle. Organizations scanning sensitive documents want context-aware classification without sending data to external cloud services.
That's a very real enterprise use case. A lot of companies don't need a general chatbot. They need a system that can read sensitive material, classify it correctly, and keep the data inside the firewall. That's where local models can be compelling.
And another archive paper on self-training says language models don't just flatten when they learn from their own outputs. They get restructured, with surface markers rising while deeper syntax can degrade. That's a useful reminder that model behavior can shift in ways that aren't obvious from a single benchmark.
That's a really good cautionary note to end the research section on. If models are training on their own output more often, then we need better diagnostics, not just prettier samples. The failure mode may be subtle before it becomes obvious.
And finally, there's a Grok angle from 24/7 Wall Street suggesting Grok could undermine a SpaceX IPO. The broader takeaway is less about one listing and more about how Musk's AI products can spill over into his other businesses, especially when the model's behavior is part of the brand risk.
That's the key point. When a founder's companies are this interconnected, AI behavior isn't just a product issue, it's a capital markets issue. Investors will look at the whole stack, not just the rocket company or the chatbot.
That's our rundown for today. OpenAI pushing into PowerPoint, ads, finance, and creative media, Anthropic growing through enterprise and regional access, Google widening Gemini into hardware and world models, and research reminding us that local deployment and training dynamics still matter a lot. A busy day, but the pattern is pretty clear. AI is moving deeper into the tools, workflows, and institutions people already depend on.
And that means the important questions are shifting too. It's not just which model is smartest, it's which one is most trustworthy, most embedded, and easiest to govern when things go wrong. That's where the next phase of the race is being decided.
Until next time, keep building, keep questioning.